Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Fellowship Church Online. Thank you so much for being here today as we continue our series called He's Still Got the Whole World in His Hands. If you are new to Fellowship Online and today is your first time joining us, I want to thank you. We really do appreciate you checking us out, and we really hope that you enjoy the service. We would love the opportunity to get to know you and really to keep you informed of all that's going on here. You can do that by filling out a connection card there in the comments, or go right to the homepage of our website, fellowshipchurchct.com. Just fill out with whatever you're comfortable with, honestly. Hey, we want to thank all of you who have been giving here each week. We sincerely appreciate it. I love this quote from Winston Churchill. He says, "You make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give." See, money is often the last thing we trust God with. I know it was for me, but when we do, it's so rewarding and so freeing. So if you'd like to give, you can do so on our website or app. You can also text to give. Text Fellowship CT to 833-245-6507. Thanks so much for joining us at FC Church Online. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for, to be overcome by your presence, Lord.
Well, hey church, it's an honor to connect with you wherever you might be, whether it's on your phone or your laptop, maybe you're watching on TV or even on Facebook. I don't take for granted our time together. I'm so glad that you carved this time out so that we can connect. We're in the middle of this brand new series here called He Still Has the Whole World in His Hands. And we're diving into the characteristics of God, the things that He Himself wanted you to know about Him. You know, we've looked at His compassion, we've looked at His mercy, and if you've missed those, go ahead and check those out online. But today I want us to really focus our attention onto His loyal and unfailing love. Now, what do you think about when you think of unfailing love? When I think about love and loyalty, one of the things that I think about are just elderly couples who have been together for decades with each other, and maybe one of them gets sick and they're sacrificially taking care of each other a little bit near the end of their lives, and you can just see it, and it's just beautiful. Or maybe you're thinking about moms or dads and how that they just love their kids so much. They'll do anything for their kids. They'll work multiple jobs, they'll sacrifice, they'll do things just for their children. I know Laura has a friend of hers whose husband has MS, and she works as a nurse all day, and then she comes home and she takes care of him all evening. He can't even get out of bed on his own. She takes care of him all evening, sleeps, gets up in the morning, takes care of him again before she goes off to work. She's sacrificed vacations and travel. It's truly a life of loving service. It's beautiful and it's encouraging when you hear it, and so sacrificial. It gets you thinking, where does this loyal love come from? I mean, it's just so amazing and inspiring. Well, I believe it comes from God. See, God loves us with a loyal love. And when we do the same thing, we are really showing the love of God to those around us. See, I know that we're all a little gun shy entering into this brand new year, right? We're worried about the shoe that's going to drop, what's going to happen here. But can I tell you this? This year can honestly be a great year because we have a great God who loves us. I want to go back to our key verse that we've been launching from every week over the last couple of weeks, Exodus 34:6, where God is literally describing to Moses and to the people of Israel and to us, really His characteristics, His character, what are the key core components of God and what makes Him up and makes Him unique as a God to follow. And He says this, Yahweh, the Lord, the God of compassion and mercy. We've talked about those. He says, I'm slow to anger and I'm filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. So today, again, I want us to unpack this unfailing love, this loyal love of God. And so we're going to do that by going to take a look at the life of Joseph. Now, Joseph was one of Jacob's kids. We just talked about Jacob. Jacob had his issues, and so it's no surprise that because of his issues, his family had their issues as well. And there was a certain amount of pretty good dysfunction going on there. And one glaring place of dysfunction was in the area where Jacob shows his son, Joseph, extreme favoritism. And so this leads to all kinds of problems. But it starts with not only the favoritism, but Joseph has this dream. And this dream, in this dream, he explains to his older brothers that one day they're going to bow down to him. Well, they were already sick of the favoritism. And the last thing that they wanted to hear about was the fact that they were going to bow down to this snot-nosed kid, right? And so this led to really some extreme betrayal and extreme acts upon one another. And after this dream, the long story short is that Joseph is grabbed by his brothers. They fake his death. He's sold into slavery. And there he works in another nation, in a whole different country as a slave, until he is actually set up for a crime that he didn't commit, and he's thrown into prison. So this is where we're going to meet with the story of Joseph and what's going on in his life. He goes from the favored son to slavery to prison. And here he is, rock bottom, where he finds himself in prison. But here's what's so unique, and what I want to show you today is this is where we see the word for loyal love show up in this context. Right at Joseph's lowest point, we see God's loyal love. So I want to take a look at Genesis 39, verse 21. It says, "But the Lord," after all this had happened to Joseph, "the Lord was with Joseph in the prison, and he showed him his faithful love." That's what we're talking about today. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. See, I want to introduce you today to a unique Hebrew word. And I don't normally do this, but it's a word that's used throughout the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. It's a word that, and the reason I'm doing this, is a word that doesn't really have an English equivalent to it. So it deserves its own discussion and unpacking this a little bit. So the word is chesed. And what this word means, it has a lot of meanings, very broad, very unique type of word, and it's used in a lot of different contexts throughout the Hebrew Scriptures. But it's the word that means mercy, kindness, loving kindness, steadfast love, faithful love, abundant goodness, great loyalty, much mercy doing, and loyal love. So a good way for us to really talk about it is it's really God's commitment to do a generous and a surprising amount of good in another person's life over a long term, not based on their performance, but just based on his own promise. That is what we want to talk about today. God has chesed for you. He has this incredible loyal love to you. This loving kindness, this faithfulness, this abundant goodness, this much mercy doing and loyal love for you. And it's connected to something called God's covenant love that he does in our lives. And we're going to unpack that a lot more next week as well, so make sure you tune in for that. But here's the point. Even when you screw up, even when you fail, even when you make mistakes and you blow it, his love is always there. His love will see you through all your ups and downs in your relationships. It goes before you. It's got your back. His love is strong. It's incredibly loyal, and it never, ever, ever runs out. You know, the problem is we don't always feel or sense that loyal love, do we? And because of that, I think, as the hymnist wrote, we're prone to wander, right? We're prone to wander from God. We feel isolated. Sometimes we feel forgotten by God, even though he's got this incredible loyal love. And maybe Joseph felt that way in the prison, but we feel this way sometimes. So how do we lean into this loyal love, this reality of this loyal love that God has for us, no matter what our circumstances are? Well, first of all, we need to do this. We need to remember the God who remembers you. You know, God never forgets, but we forget, don't we? I mean, think about it. A lot of us, we have forgotten to, and we've left the garage door open, right? Only, you go and you go to bed at night, and if you have a garage, you've had that moment, you've had that time when you got up in the morning, you load the stuff into the car, you open the door to the garage, only to find that the large garage door was left open overnight. And man, it's just an unsettling feeling, isn't it? You're just like, man, our house was open all night. Anybody could have walked in. Why? Because we forgot to close the door. We thought we closed it, but we forgot. So when you get to my age, you literally will walk into a room and you'll suddenly go, why did I walk in here? I don't remember what it was. Or you walk upstairs, you're like, why am I upstairs? And you have to rethink and think again. You will forget from one moment to the next. And I think we've all had our fair share of forgetting our passwords, haven't we? We're constantly changing them. We're always getting off just a little bit. I have to go back, start my username all over, my passwords all over again, get constant emails, and having to reset these passwords over and over again. We forget all the time. And sometimes when we're going through extreme difficult seasons in our life, we can forget that God has never really forgotten us. And we tend to think and believe that when everything's good, that God loves us and he's smiling down on us and he's present and he's good and he loves to do good things for us. But when things are bad, we tend to think, well, God's angry at us, he's mad at us, he's taken things away from me, he's punishing me, or he's turned his back on me, he's abandoned me, he's not anywhere near us. We have these feelings that make us sometimes feel this way. But God's loyal love is there with us in the good times and especially in the bad times as well, through the thick and the thin. And when life is moving up and to the right and things are going great, God is there. And when life is going down into the dumps, God is still there. I mean, isn't it true that even our days are full of both good and bad? We like to think that we have just good days and bad days, but even in the same day, we have good things happen to us and bad things happen to us. It's both true that what we hear and read in James 1:17, whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father. But it's also just as true, as the psalmist wrote in Psalm 34:18, that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. So if I'm honest, I love the good and happy times. I love the trouble-free days and seasons. I love the unexpected blessings that happen in my life. I rest in those, and I celebrate them. Sometimes I even take them for granted. But I learn the most about myself and God in the difficult days and seasons of my life. I learn about my character, and I learn about God's loyal love. I learn lessons in times of waiting. I hate to wait, but I learn valuable lessons in those seasons. And those moments literally changed my life. And what I come to find out after it's all over, that God has loved me through it all. So, if you're struggling, rest assured, God is close to you with a strong and a loyal love. You may have needed to hear that today. You may not see it. You may not even feel it. But he is definitely at work in your life. And he's with you. And he loves you. Well, let's go back to Joseph. Joseph finds himself in prison. He's alone. He's desperate. He's confused. I think God wanted us to know this is what's going on in Joseph's life, yet God is present with him. I love that God's name shows up when things are the worst for Joseph. I really do, because God does his best work in the dark. Well, Joseph finds favor in prison. God gives him this, and he has his favor in prison. He receives a little bit of freedom in prison, a little bit of responsibility, kind of moves up the food chain a little bit there. Enter the baker and the wine taster for the Pharaoh. They have just been thrown into prison. We're not totally sure why, but they've been cast into prison, and they both have disturbing dreams. And so Joseph hears about him. He says, why don't you tell me your dreams? So the wine taster says, okay, I'll tell you my dream. And he tells Joseph his dream. And the long and the short of it is, Joseph goes and interprets this dream and says, you're going to be here in the prison for 3 days, and then you're going to be released and get your old job back. And this guy's like, wow, that's awesome. I'm so glad it's just a 3-day stint here. Well, the baker is like, hey, tell me my dream. Interpret my dream. And so the baker tells Joseph his dream. And Joseph, unfortunately, the news isn't as good for the baker. He says, well, you're going to be here for 3 days as well, but unfortunately, you're going to be executed after 3 days. Your life's about to end. Get your affairs in order. Well, we pick up on this, and sure enough, it all happens, just like Joseph says, just like God helped him interpret that dream. And in Genesis 40:14, we get a little bit of a sense of Joseph and his desperation and what's going on with him in prison. He turns to the wine taster as he's being released, and he says this, please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to the Pharaoh so that he might let me out of this place. Now, I want to show you something. That word remember that Joseph used is actually the word chesed. It's actually about that loyal love. Have some loyal love. Show me some kindness. Show me some goodness and mercy. Be consistent. Remember me. So the wine taster says, oh, yeah. He goes back to work and he literally forgets about Joseph. Just like we forget about garage doors and passwords, he literally forgets about Joseph and what Joseph did for him. And he forgot for not just a couple days or weeks, for 2 long years. Can you imagine what Joseph was going through at that time, having been forgotten for 2 years? And again, we forget all kinds of things, but God never forgets you. His love's loyal. So remember the God who always remembers you. And then secondly, trust God is working even when you can't see it. This is what the theme is that we see all throughout the scriptures. When we see somebody's success, think about it, and even in this life that we live in, we don't see the years beforehand, do we? We don't see all the hard work that's led to the breakthrough moment, the repetition, the grinding out, the consistency over time. Overnight successes, they even say, are usually 10 years old. That's just how it works. So you may be in the middle of this time in your life that's just really hard, and it feels like you're in the dark. But as you're being broken down during this season, remember that there's a breakthrough in your life that's coming, that God's always at work. He's working even while you're waiting, even while you're wrestling, even when things are stuck, even when you're uncertain, sick, frustrated, unemployed, humiliated, afraid, even when nothing's working, God is working. Joseph's story is really a true lesson in this. So Pharaoh has this dream ultimately 2 years later, and he's extremely disturbed by this dream, so much so that because he's disturbed, everybody around him's disturbed. And suddenly, the wine taster remembers Joseph. Dreams, interpretations, Joseph. So they go and they call for Joseph. They clean him all up. They bring him before the Pharaoh. And the first thing that Joseph says is, I can't do this on my own. Only God can do this. I love how he gives credit where credit's due. God lifts up the humble, doesn't he? Well, Joseph interprets the Pharaoh's dream. And he says, basically, here's what's going to happen. As a nation and as a region, we're going to have 7 years of prosperity. We're going to have so much good happening, and the crops are going to come in so magnificently. But then we're going to be followed by 7 years of incredible famine. And so then he, on top of that, offers a solution to the problem. He says, here's what we should do, Pharaoh. We should save all the excess during the time of abundance so that we can prepare and have ready what we have for the famine. I mean, Joseph's a leader. God's been developing him in the darkness. Pharaoh sees this. He goes, this guy not only tells me stuff, he has an offer solution. Well, he embraces this. The Pharaoh does. He raises Joseph to be his right-hand person, and Joseph is over food saving and then eventually the distribution during the famine. Now, let's fast forward to the famine. Here is Joseph's been working for 7+ years for Pharaoh. Now, people from neighboring countries are coming to Egypt for help because they find out that Egypt has excess, including Joseph's own brothers. Yeah. I mean, you can't write it any greater than this. They literally are coming back to Egypt. Now, again, they think Joseph is long gone. They think he's a slave somewhere. They have no idea. Well, eventually, they stand before Joseph. It was an incredible moment. But what I want to talk about is I want to fast forward to another moment where they're before Joseph. Because what happens is eventually Joseph's father, Jacob, dies. We learned all about Jacob last week. Now, his brothers are terrified because they know that Joseph knows who they are, and they're thinking he's only keeping us alive because he wants to honor Dad. So when Dad's dead, we're dead. So they go so far to even fake a letter from their dad like he's still alive. But eventually they're found out, and they find themselves bowing before Joseph and asking for mercy. It's the fulfillment of Joseph's dream. Now, that's not the major point of all this. The major point is what Joseph says in that moment, which is powerful. In Genesis 50, 19 and 20, it's recorded, but Joseph replied, "Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me. There's no doubt about that. But God intended it all for good. He had another work planned. He was working in the dark. He brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people." You know, when I hear this, it gets me thinking of you sometimes. Some of you have been through really difficult things. Maybe you've gone through a divorce, a death of a loved one. Maybe you've been mistreated at work or looked over or passed over. Or maybe you've even experienced a betrayal of a friend. You know, some of you have lived, though, long enough to see, even though those terrible things have happened in your life, God has ultimately redeemed those things for good. He's just in that business of doing that. And there's such insight from Joseph. The fact that God is always at work. He never stops through the bad times and through the good times in our life. You know, our family just recently went through a difficult time where Laura's dad went to be with the Lord. And we find such great solace in that, in the fact that he's with God right now. And it really is amazing, and it does give us such hope. But we're also tremendously saddened by it. And as we were thinking about it, and as I was thinking about it, I was traveling to Tennessee to attend the funeral and to be with Laura. And I was beginning to reflect and think about Tom, that's her dad, and what was going on in his life, especially over the last 6 weeks, but even throughout his whole life. He had a very difficult life, a lot of physical ailments that were going on in his life that he was constantly battling all the time. And even in the last 6 weeks, his health had been failing tremendously, and even his mind was really in peril as well. And so it was just a really, really hard last 6 weeks. Laura was so amazing. She would go down there every week and spend time with him and just take care of her dad. But one of the things that Tom really loved and enjoyed was collecting coins. We all kind of had fun with that. You know, like, this guy's got so many coins of so many things. And I remember when I was down there with him and Laura a few weeks ago, we brought his coins to him in the place that he was staying. And he started to rifle through the coins, and he said to me, he says, "You know, Andy," he goes, "I know these coins really aren't worth anything." He says, "But I like them. I just love them. I love to look at them. I love, I think it grounded him a little bit as well when he would see them." And he says, "I just like looking at them, and I like thinking about what they're connected to." Well, as I was with him that one day, there was one coin in particular that really caught his attention. And it was this coin that was a commemorative coin of not just 9/11, but of the capture of Osama bin Laden. And on the front of the coin, there's this picture of the Navy SEALs that had caught bin Laden. And on the back is the Twin Towers and such. But there's this inscription that says, "You can run, but you can't hide." And he one day when I was with him, he loved that coin. He would say that name. He would say, "Boy, you can run, but you can't hide." And then he would laugh afterwards. He just liked it. Just kind of connected with him. Well, during the day, later that day, he misplaced that coin, and he was just so disturbed that he misplaced it. He's looking all through his baskets of coins, and then he found it again, and his eyes lit up again, and he's like, you can run, but you can't hide. And as I was thinking about that, I was driving down to Tennessee. I was thinking about something that King David wrote when he was kind of near the end of his kingship. He's at a time of reflecting himself, actually. And he writes the most famous psalm, probably of all, Psalm 23. Matter of fact, we read this psalm a lot of times at funerals, but it's really an amazing psalm before that. And so I'm thinking of that psalm, and I'm thinking about the fact of verse 5 where it says that God seats us at a table in the presence of our enemies, and he anoints our head with oil. And I think about that, and I thought, this guy, Tom, he didn't have a lot of enemies in life. He was a very, very nice person, very charming. But his enemies were his physical ailments. He was physically ill for decades of his life. And these things seemed to just surround him. They sat at his table. They were just always there. They were reality in his life. But you know what else was also reality of his life? God's presence. God was with him, even though he was seated in the presence of his enemies, the physical ailments. He anoints my head with oil. My cup runs over, David said. And then in the next verse, David writes, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I got thinking about that, and honestly, the truest interpretation of surely goodness and mercy shall follow us really has this concept and the sense of pursuit. Surely goodness and mercy chase after us all the days of our life. They pursue us. They continue after us. And it got me thinking about Tom, how that God pursued him with such great love, even through the difficult times of his life. And it got me thinking of his coin. You can run, but you can't hide. You can run from God's love, but you certainly can't hide from his love. God's limitless, and he's got a limitless love for you. He's passionate for you. He's pursuing you with his great love, and he's relentless. So remember this, that God's love is bigger than your past. It's bigger than your upbringing. It's bigger than maybe there's a hurt that has kind of really set in you. It's bigger than your brokenness, and it's even bigger than your success and your talents and abilities. God loves you not for your performance, but just for who you are. So if you're living your life without a relationship with him, man, I want to encourage you to invite him into your life, to surrender to that relentless pursuit of his love. He's after you. This is one of the ways he's after you, is through what you're hearing right now. And I want to encourage you, just stop running, turn around and embrace what he's chasing with you, his goodness and his mercy, his unfailing and loyal love. And just embrace that. And I hope that right now, where you're at, wherever you might be at, you would just humble yourself and invite God to just be the forgiver of your sins and the leader of your life. And for those of you who have, may you move forward in life this week, inspired by the extravagant, loyal love of God. And may you live generously with open hands and love each other as if your lives depended on it. And may the abundant love of God surround, inspire, and encourage you in all you say and in all you do. I love you. God bless you.